a great pleasure to be the moderator here at the third day. I am myself from Germany, but here in Riga with you in the studio. And I have been for more than 20 years living in Riga. We met 1995, I think, in one of our first seminars. So like Gunter's, who from the Riga City Council, who opened yesterday the meeting, said also we are old friends, like a family, the environmental family of the Baltic states, of the Baltic Sea region, which is also the main idea of the Interreg Baltic Sea region program. It's really great to have three projects, people from the whole Baltic Sea region united to share their project results, their project views, their ideas with each other and to create an event together. It was not so easy, and we had many discussions how it should be built up. Classically, you would always start an event about environmental policy with a policy, looking from the European Union, coming down to local cases. But we decided when we started to make the agenda of this event that no, this is a project final conference. So we come from the projects, we go to municipalities who do action in their cities, and then we look at policy. And we think a little bit, this is the purpose of this day, for what I want to invite you. We think a little bit about how this all fits into the greater picture of European policy, of the whole Baltic Sea region policy on transport and sustainable mobility. And then we could have a little look at the future with our municipalities, with representatives here who do sustainable mobility policy and implementation every day. This is the idea of the panel. It will last for 3 hours with a little break in between. And I would like to introduce our speakers to you, and then I will ask the first ones to come on stage. So we will have a contribution from Matthew Baldwin. He's the Deputy Director General at the European Commission in the road safety and coordinator for road safety and sustainable mobility at the Directorate General MOVE. Then we do have Thomas Erlandsson. He is a senior advisor at the European Union's strategy for the Baltic Sea region, priority area transport. So he's the coordinator of that policy. And then we do have representatives from 3 cities. First, Joachim Lohse. He's the former Minister of Transport and Environment and Construction in the German federal state of Bremen, which is a state and a municipality. And we do have Kent Lindström from the Karlskrona municipality, a small municipality in Sweden. And we do have Anton Nikitin from Vilnius municipality, Lithuania. That's the capital of Lithuania, so a bigger municipality. And we have Angelos Meuleman from the organization Taxi Stop, who is very engaged and experienced in involving the inhabitants, the public, into mobility projects. So I would like now to ask the first speaker, the first 2 speakers, to prepare themselves. I hope you have your computers ready. And then Matthew Baldwin from the European Commission. Sustainable mobility, the Green Deal is everywhere, all around us, and we here on the ground and in the Baltic Sea region, of course, we want to link all our projects and all our work to the Green Deal. So maybe you can give us a little insight of the Green Deal and what actually it says about sustainable mobility.
Well, yes, good morning. Thank you very much, Heidrun. Good morning, everybody, dear Baltic friends. Delighted to join you for the Riga Mobility Summit 2020. It's actually really critical, Heidrun, that we think about mobility in these challenging and difficult times from all different sorts of perspectives. Obviously, European here in Brussels, of course, national, than naturally, but also regionally, locally, and from a city perspective, exactly as you've just set out so well, which is why this summit is such a great idea. And putting my cards on the table up front, if we're going to deliver a truly European Green Deal and a sustainable, resilient recovery in the post-COVID era, we're going to have to join forces. We're going to have to work in partnership and with not just governments, but civil society and NGOs and industry, and crucially, across traditional boundaries that sometimes cut transport off from environmental or other sustainable considerations. So I'm really delighted to be with you, even if it's only in this virtual form on this occasion. But please, if I may say, keep this broad Baltic approach going on transport and mobility. And, well, depending on what you hear, please keep inviting me to join you. So let me start again, Heidrun, with that big picture and this terrible COVID crisis that never seems to quite end. It's clear that transport has been one of the hardest hit sectors in the COVID crisis. I won't give you the terrible numbers, you know them by heart, but it's an unprecedented fall in transport activity. It's disrupted connectivity from top to bottom. Freight levels, thankfully, haven't fallen quite as much, and I really want to congratulate everyone involved in the freight process for keeping freight moving during the crisis, including across borders. If you think back to the start of the crisis in March, there were quite a lot of worries that we were going to have panic buying, that people were concerned there wouldn't be the essential supplies of food and medicines in the stores. And I think the freight industry collectively showed that the supply chain would remain open, and consumers came to understand that essential supplies would be there. This was a very big priority for Commissioner Vălean, who made, I think, a big splash with her Green Lanes initiative to keep the freight moving across borders. And I think we've been pretty successful, with great support also from member states and Parliament, in enabling the freight industry to deliver that essential mission. But as you said, Heidrun, while the COVID crisis continues to rumble on, we are now thinking about recovery. It's not too early to think about that. And we want to ensure that transport plays its traditionally pivotal role in that recovery. You will have seen back in May the Commission proposal on the budget side. So much of this stuff must start with the money, including a reinforced long-term EU budget till 2027 for more than 1 trillion euros, and a very exciting and unprecedented idea in the form of Next Generation EU, a 750 billion euro recovery instrument. That's on top, in other words, on top of what is planned for the CEF, for cohesion spending, and so on. And this is what I want to start with and really send you a message today. Over the next few months, as member states will be putting forward their plans on how and where to spend this new money under this new fund, we in the Commission will be offering suggestions in the coming weeks, some ideas, some guidance, stressing the need, I hope, for the projects to, and the linked reforms, by the way, to strengthen our cohesiveness as a union, to build the resilience of our economy and our sector, to help job growth, and last but not least, to support what we call the twin green and digital transitions. Now, of course, the Recovery Fund is going to go much wider than transport, but I hope that we can agree in this room, this virtual room, that transport and mobility must be a big part of this. And I hope you would also agree that this list is very well tailored to what we need to do in transport, what needs to be done anyway to develop and strengthen our transport sector. So this is my first plea, that member states, that local and city governments, Baltic transport industries think hard about what and where that new spending is needed in the area of mobility, and how to fight your corner in these all-important draft national plans, which will be discussed with the Commission this autumn. Once again, it's think about how we can support the green recovery, strengthen our resilience, boost jobs, and if I might add one other element, things that can be done quickly. We can't hang around with this money. 70% of it has to be committed by 2022. So make sure that the projects you come forward with are shovel ready. So I think this is just one illustration of just how serious the European Commission is about the European Green Deal, in the sense of making sure as we come out of the COVID crisis that it's not just more of the same, not just back to the old normal. And I'll say more about that in a minute. The second message I wanted to give, which is related to this, is a plug for our upcoming comprehensive strategy on smart and sustainable mobility, which is planned for the end of this year, which will set out the key initiatives we see for the coming years, not just this year, not least to deliver what we've promised to deliver. That is to say, a 90% reduction in CO2 emissions from transport by 2050 to make transport net carbon neutral by then. Now, our new strategy is a closely guarded secret at this stage, but I can tell you that we will be definitely looking at, for example, ways to ramp up the production and use of sustainable alternative fuels in both the aviation and waterborne sectors, not least to meet the ambition already publicly stated of at least 1 million publicly accessible recharging and refueling points by 2025. This means we're going to revise the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Directive. We're going to have another bash at the 10T regulation. And what we are looking to do is to lay the foundation for a modern, future-proof, climate-friendly transport infrastructure. And again, this paper is going to be a very big deal. It's going to be the biggest strategic document on transport since the 2011 white paper. We have a big public consultation ongoing. Make sure that your voice is heard and watch this space. The third and final message, Heidrun, I wanted to stress is that we ensure that we have sustainable and safe mobility in the post-COVID era within this overall meta priority, if you like, for the green recovery. In fact, most of my time is spent these days as the EU's coordinator for road safety and sustainable mobility. And indeed, there's a strong synergy between these two items. And I'd like to explain a bit. What we saw on the roads during the COVID crisis was a big short-term drop in fatality. We had, in fact, 36% fewer people died on our roads in April of this year compared to April 2019. Even if that's just a short-term blip, if you look at the numbers, that means more than 500 lives were saved from our terrible annual total of more than 22,000 a year. What we also know is that the decline in deaths was less than proportionate to the drop in traffic. I'm afraid that suggests that car drivers were probably opportunistically speeding on some empty roads during the pandemic. We've been a bit reticent to push the case for road safety during the crisis because, firstly, COVID was drowning out everything else, and we didn't want to appear to be opportunistic to link these two issues. But as we start to come out of it, a few things really strike me. The first is that despite all the horrors of COVID, globally, we are going to lose more people to deaths on the road globally than we will lose to the COVID virus, assuming that road deaths come in at the estimated 1.3 million worldwide. That's extraordinary. Our citizens, meanwhile, indeed all of us, have accepted the really quite draconian and unnecessary measures adopted by public authorities affecting their lives, affecting their livelihoods to deal with the COVID crisis. We haven't seen public unrest for the most part. We've seen widespread public acceptance of the need for public action to save lives. And the third point is that necessary action against COVID has entailed huge economic costs and sacrifice to society. And I'm not complaining about that. It needed to be done. Governments have done this very bravely. But the action to save lives through road safety means, by contrast, huge economic savings. Road crashes cost the EU between 1 and 2% of our GDP every year. And money spent on lives, therefore, is incredibly cost effective. We shouldn't need a cost effective incentive to do it, but that's what it is. And the good news is that we've now agreed, and it's available as of yesterday on the UN website in 6 working languages, to a new UN General Assembly resolution for a second decade of action on road safety. So I hope we can start to restore the momentum that we've lost during the COVID crisis. And then linked to the sustainable mobility, and this is really my final point, and I'd be very interested to hear others' views on this. I think we're seeing some real signs that the public wants to see a different kind of personal mobility emerging from this crisis. Certainly in the urban context. If you look in Belgium, we have seen a 45% increase in cycling. I saw some numbers yesterday suggesting it might even be higher than that. 20% of people said to opinion polls that they want to use their cars less. 70% of people want better bike lanes, better pedestrian footpaths. which in turn, by the way, opens up very exciting new ways of reducing our over-dependence on private carbon-fueled cars in cities, and thereby reducing noise, reducing CO2 emissions, reducing air pollution, reducing congestion. And together, all of these things with the cost of road crashes amount to an external cost of around €1 trillion a year, every year in the EU. In other words, pretty much broadly the sum of the EU budget. Looking at these different items, it really makes me think. I want to go back to the point I made right at the start, that we have to work in a very close partnership if we're going to really deliver a change in our mobility, a partnership between the Commission and the member states, the regions of the EU, such as the Baltic Sea zone, and of course, the city and local governments that we're going to hear from in a moment. So that's really my final priority in this post-COVID era, to see if we can tackle road safety and develop sustainable urban mobility together. It won't be very easy. We're also starting to see a big return of the car traffic, perhaps because people are still a bit unwilling to use public transport. And that's not a good situation, both in terms of sustainable mobility or indeed road safety. So that's something we need to think about this morning. And let me stop there, Hydra. I hope I put some ideas on the table about how we're addressing the green recovery, the importance of the Recovery and Resilience Fund. We live in some pretty interesting times. I think we're in the middle of some serious change. And for the most part, I think it's a positive evolution in terms of sustainable mobility and transport. But very much looking forward to our discussion. Looking forward to staying with you this morning.
Thank you very much, Matthew. You receive a virtual applause from everybody. And the physical one here from the people sitting with me.
That's louder applause than I ever got in any room.
I have a full room here. People, have a look here and don't look into your emails. You see? Here is the studio. Okay, thank you very much. There is already a comment in the chat of a lady who says she likes the 30-kilometer sign behind you where you are sitting. So, and you have it also as a pin. Very nice. There was a question from Yuris Kondratienko. €1 trillion in externality costs of transport sounds huge. This needs communication. Where to get more info on this, and maybe some study or something like that? You will send a link to the study, okay, and we put it to the post-conference documentation, okay? Is there any more clarification question to the figures or the backgrounds which Matthew was talking about? Then please put it into the chat. You were so crystal clear. We will then later squeeze you in the panel discussion. But at first, we invite Thomas Erlandsson to the stage. Thomas is from the Swedish Ministry of Transport, and he is the coordinator of the transport policy area of the Baltic Sea region. So, Thomas, you are translating the European policy to the Baltic Sea region and try to maybe lobby for Green Deal in the Baltic Sea region. But you are also in charge of developing the transport part of the revised Baltic Sea region strategy, the new chapters for the next year, and which is then always the driver for all of us developing projects and programs and ideas. We have to fit to the bullets which you write in the program. And I admit sometimes they are quite cryptic, and sometimes we would like to see them much more on the ground for sustainable mobility. So maybe you can give us a little ideas about the change in the Baltic Sea region action plan, sustainable mobility policy, how ambitious it's going to be in terms of what Matthew just said, and what do we need to comply with if we want to make projects and get your signature of a positive support letter. That's, I think, also a little bit your role. So, Thomas, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I work for the Swedish Ministry for Infrastructure, and I'm also coordinator for policy and transport in the Baltic Sea strategy. Yes, I would like to start with presenting the ongoing programming on the Interreg Baltic Sea program. Perhaps you've seen it. It's been out on public consultation for some time. It was closed the 4th of September. So I will give you an insight in how you could finance from this program. I guess most of the projects that are running in our thematic area are financed by this program. Could there be some slides, Marta? Or otherwise, it's connected to the EU programs for Smarter Europe and Green Europe. And it's divided in 7 topics. The first one is more innovative and resilient economies and societies. I'm looking for finding mobility in this, and its keywords could be resilience, consumption patterns, smarter specialization. But I think it's more of changing the here it comes now, I think. Yes, thank you. I think it's more directed towards change in society, how we consume, how we produce, how we lessen the dependence on global change. The second topic is, please change, Marta, thank you, is responsive public services. Here I could find the topics of public transport. How could we arrange and manage smarter public transport to lessen the dependence of private cars, for instance? The urban-rural dimension could also be approached here. And many of us have been connected working with mobility as a service initiatives. It could also be come in under this topic. The third topic, sustainable water management, climate change. I don't think it's so much for us working with transport and mobility. And the fourth, blue economy resilient to the climate change. Shipping is, of course, a part of this. How could we cross the Baltic Sea with less disturbance on the environment? Fifth topic, circular economy. I think those of us that are involved in spatial planning, I think those projects could very well be financed from under this topic. The topic number 6, low carbon energy systems. Of course, a lot of projects working with fuels could find finance here. We have to abolish the fuels from carbon. And the 7th topic, I think here we find the most of the mobility and transport projects green and intelligent transport and mobility, renewable fuels, of course, smart mobility, and especially when it comes to the transport of goods and freight, we have to produce a green transport system. The programming is still ongoing, and this is not cut in stone yet, but this is what we could expect for the next program period. And I think, to me, it looks like a substantial change from what we have had seen before. And it is very much focused on a greener transport system and smarter transport systems. So that's what I was going to say about the programming of the Interreg Baltic Sea program. But I would also like to present policy area transport. As you said, Heidrun, we are under a revision process of the whole action plan for the Baltic Sea, the strategy for the Baltic Sea region. It is almost finished. It's now for consultation in the Commission, but I guess what concerns policy area transport is rather stable. We have 3 actions. The first one, improve connectivity of the regions, is fairly the same that we have in the former plan. It's very much about cooperating with EU level and the European coordinators for the Trans-European network. They are responsible for the implementation of the overall European core network, and we are cooperating in a bottom-up way with regions and local authorities. How could we adjust the last mile of the journey or the transport? And here we, of course, have a great responsibility to find solutions that are green and using clean fuels. The second one, the former second, was a cooperation with neighboring countries and third countries. We have integrated that in Action 1 and made room for a new action. We have for a very long time been very orientated in finding green solutions and lessen the environmental disturbances. But now we have one action entirely devoted to development of measures to combat the climate change. This is a new action plan. We haven't planned it in detail, and I think this is an open floor for new initiatives and stronger actions towards a climate neutral transport system. The third one is a basket of finding new technologies and solutions. It could be directed towards public transport solutions, automated driving, introducing digitalization, and smart specialization. So this is action plan, and we are in the beginning in developing the details and which kind of projects we will support in for the next 7 years. I would finish with how we will change focus, or rather implement a new way of cooperation. We have always been working in the project form. Actually, the policy area steering group and myself as a coordinator have very little resources to develop new solutions and recommendations. It's done by stakeholders forming a group and starting a project. And projects is an excellent form for finding, discuss ideas and finding solutions. But when the project ends and the partners go back to the normal, ordinary tasks, there is too often a standstill if there's not a new project, but we need to have more continuity and endurance, and we will now implement a form called process, a flagship process. And this will strengthen our ability to implement the actions needed, give us more continuity and endurance, and also more flexibility and adaptability to changes along the journey, the discussions, the progress. The project form is too often locked when it comes to partners and what they should deliver. When you start a process, you detect new possibilities. There are other projects going on. Why not join with them and come out with an even better result? A process could help to do that. So this, I think, will be very important to implement in the new program period. And I'm looking forward to our first development of a process, and we are working now with linking sea and land transport, which is a topic that has not been done enough in so far. So that's my presentations, and I'm looking forward now to the discussions, and yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thomas, and you get an applause from us here and from all over Europe and the Baltic Sea region. Yes, there is already a heavy discussion ongoing in the chat. I see that, and I will take it up in the speaking of the panel. I would like to start with you both, Matthew and Thomas, the discussion, coming a little bit from the top of what you explained about the programs. I think both programs and programmatic ideas, the Green Deal philosophy and the Baltic Sea region transport philosophy, they are standing in one line. And for me, as a person from non-governmental organization, working a lot with environmental communication, with people, trying to convince people to consume less, to use less cars. For me, this, what you said in the policies, sounds very much technology driven. It sounds very, very much like replacing fuel cars with electric cars. It's new technologies, booming and boosting economy now on electromobility issues. But for me, the whole social aspect, the whole communication aspect, to the point which you, I think, Matthew, you pointed out that public wants to see a different urban mobility, and that so many percent, I think it was 40% of people want to use more bicycles or whatsoever. And but you guys, from the strategies, you make strategies that address economy, industry, business, and tell that now we can make even a greater business with more innovative technology of transport, and we can now commute across the Baltic Sea without fuel, only with the sunshine. But we others think we must also talk about less. Less is more, less is better. But this I usually miss in these strategies. And then it's very, very difficult. There's a comment from Esther from the Union of the Baltic Cities. Then it's very difficult to make projects about it, which are focusing exactly on consumption reduction with regard to consuming transport. What do you both think? Matthew, you want to start? And then Thomas? I would wish that you have some opposing opinion, but
of course. Well, I mean, I'll take you on a bit, Heidrun. I mean, I don't think we should say that technology is irrelevant in addressing some of these things, or not part of it. I know, and I know you didn't say that. I'm being argumentative. We will, I mean, our new mobility strategy will be sustainable and smart. And just to give you a good example of that, if we think about urban mobility, a lot of it is about trying to encourage multimodality for individual citizens, as well as businesses, by the way. So if you want to connect up your bike with a train, which trains can you take your bicycle on? Which trains offer parking facilities for your bikes? Often you need your phone to tell you through an app. If you want to buy an integrated ticket, you know, we need some technologies to help us. But I do personally fundamentally agree with your, what I call your analog point, that some of the solutions are staring us in the face. I mean, we're having starting to have a lively discussion about the importance of 30-kilometer-hour speed limits and what they can do for cities. That's a terribly analog way of approaching a problem, but it's incredibly effective in terms of reducing deaths and serious injuries. Most of the solutions, indeed, to sustainable urban mobility, I would argue, are quite analog in the sense of it's about encouraging people to walk and bicycle more and to use public transport links. So I do agree with you. If I could just, and also to react to things going on the chat, Maya Rusanen, apologies for mispronouncing your name, you make a very good point about the sustainable urban mobility plans as the key approach. And I want to stress we will be looking at ways of bigging up the sumps. We've already got over 1,000 sumps. And it's spread beyond Europe too, which is exciting. And this is where, for those of you who don't know, this is where cities set out their plans and share ideas on how they can make their mobility more sustainable. And one idea that is kicking around is how we can link that more to the idea of urban nodes in the 10T strategy, and in trying to incentivize a bit more sumps. At the end, for me, getting truly sustainable mobility is about ensuring that we develop sustainable options, including fuels and technology, and giving the right pattern of incentives to consumers to use them. It's no good complaining about cars in cities. People respond to the incentives we give them. If we give them the incentive to drive into cities and park for free, they will do it. So we've got to find different ways of packaging this up for people. Sorry, it's a bit of a long answer, but I hope I stirred up the debate a bit more.
Okay, and Thomas, what is your answer? The same?
Very much. Actually, we are more or less a platform. We are inviting people, forming in projects, and we look at the objectives and we give them letter of support if it complies with our action plan. And I would say that I think the new one now is more focused on environment and climate than action plans before. There has, I can say I worked in transport area for almost 45 years, and it's been a tremendous change from when I started. It was focused on the infrastructure in building, and now it very often in smart solutions, about smart solutions in cities, how you deliver goods to the market stores, etc. Public transport solutions. But I think people want to travel. They want to meet new people in new environments, and it's very difficult to stop that. I remember in the 90s when internet was introduced, there were some people saying that now we don't have to travel, we can be on the net. The result was the opposite. I think more people were connected with people in other environments, and they wanted to go there and meet them. And I think it's very difficult to curb mobility because it's in our nature. But we have to produce smart mobility, not damaging the climate and the environment. And I think we can do that. Then I agree with you. We living in urban areas are disturbed by the lot of cars in the cities. And we could solve that too. I think it's possible. And we invite them to our platform to seek for our support.
Thomas, there are actually 2 comments in the chat from Esther from the Union of the Baltic Cities. She's directly addressing the strategy for the Baltic Sea region, and I would read them for you. How come the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region speaks about green transport and mobility instead of sustainable mobility? I miss in the actions proposed in the consultation any connection to the social aspect and the accessibility. And then she continues some part more lower, and she says about PA transport and the new ideas of sustainable mobility issues. She said urban and rural mobility projects have so far been supported mainly by horizontal action spatial planning and horizontal action climate. Can we in the future expect more support for projects and cooperation between the priority areas and horizontal areas and for mobility projects? And I would like to top it up. I heard from the horizontal area climate coordinator of the EU Baltic Sea region strategy, Valdur Lahtve, that actually the horizontal action climate is ceased because it's expected to be integrated in all the priority areas. So you, Thomas, after 45 years of transport policy, have really to become a desperate climate policy and mobility, sustainable mobility manager. What do you say about that?
Yes. The first question about sustainability, maybe the wordings in the action plan still have to be elaborated. As I said, the revision is not finished yet. We have to go deep into details and such things. So sustainability is still in our action plan. The other one was that we had 2 horizontal actions. They have now been abolished, and the idea is in the new action plan that the thematic areas should be integrated in the policy areas. And I can say that our action number 2 is about climate change, and that is a response to the abolishment of that horizontal action. Spatial planning was the other one, and during the former action plan we have collaborated very much and often with horizontal, spatial planning, and that could be integrated in a new action plan in policy area 2. I can't answer exactly how. There are limits, of course, how much you could put in a policy area before it's too wide and too complex. But we have been and will consider spatial planning in our coming work too.
Thank you very much, Thomas. I would now pose the question to Esther. You have been commenting on these policy issues. Are you satisfied with these answers, or would you like to put something more on that? Would you like to challenge Matthew on the policy level? He will find an answer on anything. But while Esther is probably typing something, I would like to ask you, Matthew, the same feature what Thomas said, that the climate change aspects and sustainability aspects are going now into all sectoral policies. That was the promise of Ursula von der Leyen. I have followed her for decades as a politician, so she is doing what she's saying, and we all environmentalists are very, very, very happy. But do you really think it can succeed to mainstream the climate issue in transport policy? Because as Thomas said 40 years ago, it has been about infrastructure, about car, about, I don't know, lorries going through all our countries, and how to mainstream really successfully the climate change in the transport policies.
Well, that's a great question, and boy, we could talk about this for the rest of the morning. In fact, I hope we will. I think you need two mainstreaming actions. I'm not very precise on my concepts here. We need to mainstream climate into transport, and we need to mainstream transport into the other way around. I mean, have a look at what's happening on road safety, which is very interesting. For years and years and years, road safety has been the narrow province of, aging gray men like me, engineers in suits, looking at how we can build better cars and better roads to make people inside the cars safer. And that's great, by the way. We have made people inside the cars much, much safer. But over time, we have not succeeded in making people outside the cars safer. So that means a totally different way of looking at our mobility and our road safety using a thing called the SAFE system. But again, you change your perspective. In the recent triumphant Stockholm Road Safety Summit, a group of academic experts actually produced a great analysis of how we can look at road safety in terms of all the different sustainable development goals of the UN, in terms of climate, in terms of affordability, in terms of inclusivity, including accessibility. And I strongly agree with those that say we've got to look at all these different aspects, including gender and everything else in terms of tackling these issues, or we won't win. We won't get the basic points across. And the other point I would stress, I suspect we're all true believers on this call, but always come back to the economics of it, to the cost elements. Because when you can show people, it's not just a question about having a lovable, livable, breathable city, but it's costing us huge amounts of money as a society in terms of external costs if we don't make the changes. And then people wake up and listen. So we've got to be all preachers and teachers for this new stuff, and we've got to find new elements to blend things in. So I very much agree with the way this is going. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to open one more topic. I have got a comment from my Zumba project partners yesterday, and I would like to read you this idea, and it addresses also you both. It's about infrastructure and investment. You know, in the Baltic Sea region projects and programs, we do have partners from the western side and from the eastern side. And we observe, of course, that Eastern European countries have been highly dependent on structural funds for financing their infrastructure and transport system. So this has not been just naturally with their own forces and money. And we would like to know if these funds managed to achieve the shift towards a more sustainable mobility system in the European Union, and what changes would be needed for the next financing period, which you both are with your strategies driving, so to say, to guarantee that the objectives related to climate neutrality will be achieved really.
Can I start?
Yes.
Actually, I cannot contribute so much to with an answer to your question. We have had very little cooperation with neighboring countries, except for Norway, but not the countries on the eastern side of our region. So I don't know how they can participate in our projects, but then they have some funds that I think it's called ENI or something, but I can't answer, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew, perhaps.
Well, it's very nice of you to go first, Thomas. I'm not the great expert on this, but I'd like to refer you to a problem that a lot of people have said to me in the mobility and the sustainable mobility field is, we have the sense there's quite a lot of funding out there, but it seems to be in lots of diverse places. And we will have a discussion at the European Mobility Days about all the different types of European funding, whether it's through Horizon Europe, whether it's through cohesion spending, whether it's through the new Recovery and Resilience Fund, whether it's through the CEF. And I really urge people to join in that discussion, to push us all in the Commission to identify, a one-stop shop would be wonderful, wouldn't it? But I have this idea, this project, which will generate European green recovery and resilience. Where can I get funding for it? And there won't always be an easy answer. And our answer may be, to turn the question back to you, Heidrun, to say, work together, because the cross-border element is really the European added value. And if countries can come to us in teams, in regions, to say, as we have, for example, Rail Baltica is a very good example of a big team, country, group of country project, but they can be much smaller than that, to make our railway system work better across frontiers, for example. Join us at the European Mobility Days at the end of this month, and we'll have some very interesting discussions, including on this funding and project type topic.
You're very idealistic, Matthew. Rail Baltica was already. Yeah, but Rail Baltica was already an issue when I came to Riga to work here in 1995. Everybody told that there will be a railway connecting Helsinki and Warsaw. I have observed in that time a lot of roads being built and expanded to drive quicker to my summer cottage in Finland. But the Rail Baltica thing is really problematic. Okay, but I would like once more to nail you on these sustainability issues. Esther has now written a comment, and she is really missing the sustainable mobility and the SUMP issue in the regional strategic framework. And I think this is really a core message to you guys making the strategies when we want to implement them on the ground by projects and by work. We need the focus on these topics which are not only technology focused, so-called green aspects in infrastructure, in the strategies. And to our mind, it's not enough that there are a few lines about sustainability. So Esther writes here, you can see it, she wants on the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea a clear focus on big fonts, capital letters, sustainable mobility, and a holistic approach to the topic. And that's a message to you.
Well, I take that back. I mean, I duck it like a good bureaucrat and say, well, I'm not responsible for the Baltics sustainability strategy, but I will pass that message back. And if there's more we can do to reach out from our pan-European approach on SUMPs to the Baltic, and to encourage the BSR strategy to make that more sustainable, particularly in capital letters, Esther, I will be totally in favour, and we'll do what we can to make that bridge. I will carry that back to my colleagues this afternoon.
And you, Thomas?
Yes, I do not see any contradiction to what we have in our new action plan. We have to be express it more clear that we are supporting sustainability. I could mention that the core of our work is transnational mobility, but we also support local mobility in the countries when there's ideas that could be spread to other countries. Then we also support that sort of projects.
And what about supporting on the strategy and the policy level? Like you said, the policy for the Green Deal, and yesterday I think we talked, Matthew, at the phone, and we had a short talk about 30 or 40% of the budget needs to be for sustainable mobility measures of projects and investments of the EU budget. Why not 100%?
Well, I would love to see 30%. I'm not setting these, but again, look, remember, it's not the way the budget process is set. It's not the European Commission coming down from on high and saying, here's where the money's going to go. Take the Recovery and Resilience Fund plans. That depends on member states coming back with plans that do these things. If the member states come back and say they want to do unsustainable things, in the end, we need to spend this money towards recovery, and that's what the Commission will do. So I want to push the thing back to you a bit, to the regions, to the cities, to the industries, to say, these are sustainable projects that we want to support, which will drive jobs, which will increase resilience, and will, of course, vitally deliver the green recovery. And then we'll advance. Carry that message forward is my message to you, Heidrun, and don't expect the Commission to say from on high, okay, it's gonna be this way. We depend on you to come forward, on the member states to come forward with the best and most sustainable plans.
I would like to play this ball back to you, Matthew. I'm since 25 years working exactly in this field of looking at what comes from the Europe as environmental strategies and working with the member states or in the region. And the member states, they from Brussels what is obligatory for them. And Brussels says it has to be the member states who need to come up with ambitious ideas, then we will do. It's the same in the common agricultural policy, it's the same in the water policy, all the strategies. And I think that's also what Esther says. She says she knows the big support of DG Move to the SUMPs, but it's the regional policy level which has to do more on it. And of course, then also the cities, but and the countries and the cities. But if we all are always saying that we expect that somewhere a strategy will be very strict, and then the strategy makers say, you have to do.
Yeah, I mean, I missed out a very important element of what I should have said, and that is that there has been very strong leadership from this Commission. You mentioned it right at the start, from Ursula von der Leyen to Frans Timmermans to my own Commissioner, Adina Vălean. We're all talking the same message about ensuring the European Green Deal and the green recovery. Remember, we have committed on transport to have a 90% reduction in transport emissions by 2050. We have committed to make the Commission net carbon neutral by 2030. These kind of targets can't be ducked and weaved. We'll be coming forward with proposals to deliver that net carbon neutrality in the Commission, which is going to mean a lot of differences on our mobility and our buildings policies and our ICT. So that's coming. What I'm saying is you can't just count on the Commission to do everything. We're providing a green framework. You'll see, I think, flagships coming out of these RRF, which describe exactly that, the need for sustainable mobility, on sustainable energy, all these different things to encourage member states to frame these in their ideas. But at the end, it's going to come down to specific projects and specific projects which will drive these things. And that's where we need the local connection up. Sorry to be long. I think I agree with you, but it's the combination of things working that will deliver the results.
Okay. We have a little chance for a few more minutes of this panel to act, because I should postpone the break for a few minutes because our next speaker, Joachim Lohse, is sitting in his home office in Hamburg, and in Hamburg at 11 o'clock CET, the whole city will test the alarm system of the fire alarm, and you will not hear anything from him. So we have one more topic to discuss. Maybe we could get a little input from the audience, still some key issues. So
I see that Juris agrees with me on Rail Baltica, Hydron. So there we go.
Yes, well, it's slowly been built, but it's 25 years waiting for it already. So Esther is commenting more on the interlink, the funding, so the strategies from Europe, going to the regional strategies, going to the Interreg funding program, and that the priorities there need to be defined. Maybe I may pose this as a question to you, Thomas. With the strong ambition of sustainable mobility in the Baltic Sea Action Plan for transport and mobility, how much do you influence the Interreg funding program setting exactly these priorities? Is this you who puts them there, or who actually for the transport and mobility sector?
The Interreg program have influence from national committees. I'm not a part of that. Every of the 8 member states have a national committee who are preparing the programming, and then they meet and discuss, and this is boiling down to this proposal on a new program. I have been involved in my steering group to comment on this and give our preference and our the needs we see. So I have been consulted, but I have no influence or participate in the decisions. No. Mm-hmm. I could comment that Interreg Baltic Sea program has been very important for us, but during the next program period, I would also like to find other financial sources to widen it. Problem is that if you're a newcomer and will apply for funding, it's the administrative process and the regulations are difficult to understand, and it takes a lot of time. So after few applications, you could do this smoothly, but the first time you hit a lot of surprises in the regulations. So I think, Matthew, you mentioned one-stop shop would be with similar regulations, making this easier. You could find more financial sources, you could blend, you could form projects coming together and do more for the money, I think. But it's...
Well, I agree with you very much, Thomas, and I wish I could make a magic wand and make that happen. I'm not a great funding expert. People make whole careers on how to make funding work in the Commission. I'm not one of them. So it's easy to come up with blithe lines like a one-stop shop. But again, we will have this discussion at the European Mobility Days with senior officials, not me, but senior officials from all the different parts of the Commission dealing with funding. And so that's your chance to really say to you, come on, guys, where does this fit? Does this fit in cohesion funding? Is this going to be part of the RRF? You know, and really pound us. We like to be pounded. But it's an extremely fair point you make. How do we make those connections up with the regional funding problems? We will have the Deputy Director General from DG Regio on that in that session.
I think it is really important, and please listen to the voice from us. We are the practitioners. We are spending the money that is put on the table, and we discuss with you the strategies, and we are really engaged in having them more sustainable, focused, but we always face the problem of the funding programs actually being far more conservative than the policy strategies. And it doesn't matter which is the funding program. You have very, very good policy ideas, the whole environmental policy, policies and strategies and legislation. And when it then comes to applying project money and to evaluate, our evaluators are, from our point of view, also very conservative. They look at technology and innovation. They look at pollution abatement directly, but all what we need, the social aspects, the communication aspects, the integration, the cross-sectoral thing, integrating climate and transport, it hardly fits to application forms. So you guys on the strategy level need to work more to get your strategies into these funding programs, and then it needs also to be evaluated in that way. So it's more than only on the policy level, and it's more than only project and local people and member states needing to wish it and go for it. There is a missing link. And I think this is really, really important. Otherwise, we do not get the policy visions down to the money for realization.
Well, my good friend Norman Poppens, who is, by the way, a good Latvian, who is the Deputy Director General for DG Regio, is joining this panel. I will memorize the question you put to now, Heidrun, and I think that will be an excellent point of discussion for us. How do we translate what you've nicely said is our good policy, not just into good description of projects, but good evaluation and action on projects? I hear you, and we take that away.
Very good. And I think with that, we can also already finish our first part of the panel.